after what has to be said is not only a surprise, but in many ways a complete catastrophe of a result and a catastrophe of a performance. This was not written up. This was not contemplated, and it certainly was not contemplated in the way that it happened. And we find ourselves now as a U.S. men's national team in Copa America in a situation of desperation, something that I don't think many of us thought was going to be the situation, given the way this group laid out with Bolivia first, which they took care of, and then Panama, our foes from CONCACAF, who for many, many years we have looked at as not on our level. And yet the soccer gods conspired, Tim Weah conspired, Gregg Berhalter conspired, and let's be honest, the entire team conspired to make this a dark day indeed. I got plenty to say about it, but I'm going to defer first to my friend Clint Dempsey. Initial thoughts on what is happening. Please tell us that the sky is not falling.
I mean, before the game, you heard Weston McKennie talk about the ref and how you needed to be smart, and then to get a red card in the way in which we got it so early in the match, and then to get the goal against the run of play after getting that red card, then to concede a goal 4 minutes later, and then, like you said, catastrophe in terms of the result, to lose to Panama, to be in a situation where going into last game is a must win, and you got to hope that your goal differential is what it needs to be to get out of the group. So, yeah, disappointed with how things went and how the game was managed. Was surprised not to see Mosse get in the game, especially when we talked about before the game, like the best midfield and what would you want to have in a dogfight. And I think when you get a red card and got to go a man down, that's a dogfight, and I'd want that player out there. But also I was surprised that them taking Balogun off as early as they did, because I thought he was still effective and one of the only guys that was giving a threat towards the Panamanian defense. So what's y'all's take?
Mosse.
The U.S. actually got off to a good start in this game. Weston McKennie scored early on. I thought it was going to be another big night for set-piece coach Johnny Vio, but it got chalked off, correctly so, for a Tim Ream offsides. And then the mood of this game changed in the 12th minute with that Matt Turner, Cesar Blackman collision. The U.S. players were not happy with that. The game got chippy after that, and Tim Weah did what he did, punching Roderick Miller, and then everything ensued after that. Tim Weah is the biggest villain, the biggest culprit for what happened tonight, but I do have some major issues with Gregg Berhalter as well. We can get into it as we dissect the match.
Okay, so as you mentioned, fundamental change in the dynamic of the game with the red card. And, we can go on and on about the red card. It was dumb. Any way you slice it, it was dumb. It was also out of character for a guy like Tim Weah, who, if you had asked me who would do something like that, he may be the last player that I would say would do something like that. But he did. And in doing so, he changed the game, and he put the rest of his team, including the 10 players on the field, in a very, very difficult situation. And he put his head coach in a very precarious situation. Speaking of that situation relative to Gregg Berhalter, I want to be very, very clear, okay? This third game coming up against Uruguay could decide the future of Gregg Berhalter. They are in this situation because of decisions that they made and actions that they took, both the players on the field and Gregg Berhalter. They have nobody to blame but themselves. And if they do not get out of the group, and I can't believe we're even talking about getting out of the group, Gregg Berhalter will be fired. And it will be just, and it will be fair, and it will be right. And these players that time and time again tell me how much they love Gregg Berhalter and support him and want him as the head coach, they will have done this, and they will have created the situation that makes Gregg Berhalter lose the job. And yet, gentlemen, I find myself in this evening not completely at a loss, not completely saying that the sky is falling, because what has happened? This team and Gregg Berhalter have now, not necessarily the way they planned it out, put all of their chips in on the third game. And this is where the rubber meets the road. Gregg Berhalter and this group that we have such high hopes for, they have to come and they have to bring it. There is no other way around. There is no hiding. This is the moment. Mosse, I know there's a lot of other things that happened in the game that you want to talk about, and then let's get back to Clint here on some other things too.
So Tim Weah gets the red card in the 18th minute. The rest of the first half, it was a back-and-forth game. The U.S. had chances. At halftime, it still felt completely plausible to me that the U.S. could win this game, even a man down. They're facing Panama. They're not playing Argentina. And then that triple sub at halftime was a disaster. You had the tactical switch of replacing Gio Reyna with Cameron Carter-Vickers and playing with a back five and only two in the midfield. That made no sense to me. He conceded the control of the game to Panama to a much greater degree than he had to. I agree with Clint. It should have either been Mosse for Gio or and then you had two like-for-likes, which made the team worse. You had Johnny coming on for Tyler Adams, and the chickens finally came home to roost on the Tyler Adams situation because there's no player you'd rather have out there in that situation in the second half if you're going to try to gut out a result. But because he's on this minutes restriction, you had to take him off. I'm wondering how much longer this is going to last. I mean, the U.S. has a do-or-die game against Uruguay. Is Tyler only going to play 45 minutes in that game?
Yeah.
And then at goalkeeper, you had to take Matt Turner off and bring on Ethan Horvath, who, whatever Matt Turner's issues, he's still much better than Ethan Horvath. So the team got clearly worse with those changes at the half, and it should have been either Mosse for Reyna or Mosse for Adams and Aronson for Reyna. You needed energy in that midfield to deal with that situation, and they didn't have that with just two in the midfield there with Johnny and Weston McKennie. So
you wanted a more romantic approach because Gregg Berhalter would probably say this was done to, you know what? Let's just shore it up. Let's get out of here with a point and take our losses and not make sure that at the very least we get a point and we play when we play for that point.
No, I wouldn't frame it as romanticism versus pragmatism. I just think in that situation when you're down a man, you need energy in the midfield. Okay. And so I just think the way he played it, he left the team short of players in the midfield and he conceded control of the game to Panama to a much greater degree than he had to. And that extra center back felt very superfluous to me. I'm not sure what the point was of that. So to me, Gregg Berhalter really got that wrong. And then to Clint's point, he takes off Balogun for Pepe when it was 1-1, and I thought Balogun was having a great game, so that was surprising. And then the last change was throwing on Sargent late, which was just kitchen sink time.
Okay, so Clint, with all of this that Mosse is saying, and look, there are plenty of people out there with knives out. All right, they had him out even before. Okay, and if you don't like Gregg Berhalter, today certainly isn't going to change your mind. And so those knives are out and ready to plunge if they're not plunging already. Is Gregg Berhalter the right person for the job going forward relative to what's going to happen here on Monday when they play against Uruguay and maybe beyond?
Well, like you said, you're going to find out against Uruguay if he's the right guy or not, because you're getting to test yourself against top competition, a team that's picked one of the favorites to win this tournament, and you still haven't gotten that signature win. And if you get this signature win, maybe you get people believing again. I agree with Mosse. I thought you should have kept a 4-4-1. It looked like we were still in the game in the first half. There was more back and forth, like you talked about. I wonder if the spacing between the three center backs, people didn't know who to go to or not in certain situations, especially on the cross that led to the goal. It looked like maybe someone could have been closer to the player that scored and not gotten such a clear chance. And then, like you said, I like Ethan a lot, but a shot right at you to think he'd have been able to get a hand to it. So in terms of Berhalter's going to be the guy, you're going to see how much these guys want to fight for him and how much they want to fight for themselves and want to fight for this country, because it's all to play for in the Uruguay game. And they go out and put in their best performance, they can get something from it.
Yeah, if you're a backup goalkeeper, you realize that for the most part you're not going to play, but you got to be ready to play. And when you come in, I'm sorry, you got to save the ball, and that is a savable shot. And it broke our heart. Obviously, it broke the spirit of this team. But they get this opportunity going forward against Uruguay. All right, Mosse. Where do I even go? Oh, I will say this. I thought if anybody acquitted themselves well, I thought that Jedi Robinson actually had a very good game. He was all over the place. And I actually thought that Weston McKennie, relative to the first game, which, albeit was not a good performance, was much better today.
I agree. Those two and Balogun.
Yes, and Balogun, absolutely.
That I think cover themselves.
Scoring goals, keep doing it, my man.
Yep.
And he took his goal incredibly well. But still, we came into this tournament wanting to believe that this team can do things, wanting to justify our attention, wanting to justify giving them our heart. And then they drop this pile of dung in this moment. And it's frustrating and it's irritating. And I feel it from people. I understand. There's a sentiment out there, even with the knives out with regard to Gregg Berhalter, that this is on the players, that today was ultimately on the players. And look, if you don't think that a coach should be fired and it should be on the players, then you're never going to think a coach should be fired, because a coach is never going to step on the field and is never going to kick a ball. Do you think that that any of those people now defending Gregg Berhalter relative to this specific game have a point?
No, to me, when the coach makes the right decisions and puts the right players on the field and they don't perform, then it's on the players. But as I said, in this match, I think there are things you can point to with Gregg Berhalter where he didn't give his team the best chance to get a result. So I wouldn't say this is all on the players. I do think Berhalter has to take a big share of the blame here.
All right. Let's fast forward it a little bit actually, let's go to the other game because it is important, ultimately. I think everybody looked at Uruguay against Bolivia as a mismatch, and it proved to be a mismatch. 5-0. I'm sorry, you got one more thing about the other game?
No.
Okay, good. So,
on Uruguay.
Absolutely. So 5-0.
What's interesting is it was 2-0 until the 77th minute, and then Uruguay poured it on late. And that was a bit of a catch-22 from the U.S. standpoint, because it made it where the U.S. now has no chance goal difference-wise to overtake Uruguay. However, Uruguay is in such a comfortable position that it might mean they rest starters for that last game. So we'll see how that plays.
So remind us all here, and for those that are listening and watching, what the scenarios are relative to the U.S. They can win, lose, and draw and still go through?
Yeah, so it's interesting because with the Euros, the first tiebreaker is head-to-head, but with Copa America, it's goal difference. So Uruguay is now on 6 points and a +7 goal difference. The U.S. is on 3 points and +1. So the reason I say it's impossible to overtake Uruguay is because they'd have to win by 3 or 4 goals. I don't think any of us think that's going to happen. So Panama is on 3 points and -1. So they're 2 behind the U.S. in the goal difference standpoint. They face Bolivia. So if Panama win that game by a big margin, there's a world where the U.S. could even beat Uruguay by a goal, let's say, and still go out. So the U.S. has put themselves in a situation where it's not completely in their hands.
Jesus. What a mess. What a mess. Clint, give us some hope. Give us some hope. Can we leave here with some hope?
I'll give you some hope. I mean, we talked about going into this tournament, who's going to be our number 9. And that's a spot that we haven't been able to fill. Now I feel like that guy is Balogun because he's been able to do it in two games in a row. We asked, can we have a player that's scoring consistently in that position? So I feel like we found our number 9. Christian is taking his game to a new level in terms of what he's able to do for both club and country. We need to get Tyler Adams fit. Once he's fit, it's exciting about what this team can start looking like. If we can get Weston back to his best, there was glimpses there today when he was box to box, getting on the end of things, especially the disallowed goal, but also the late run in which he tried to set up Pepe with that cross. So, I mean, there's some positives to still take from this. I mean, they can still get out of the group. The sky is not fallen. Yes, like you said, it's not completely in our control what happens, but you know the old saying, control what you can control. Go out and inspire us. Go out on your shield. Go out and win the game and put yourselves in a position to get out of the group. And hopefully they can do that because, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a fan, and regardless of anything, I just want them to win and do well.
Mosse, we don't want anybody to have blind faith. Yes, you have belief. Are people being delusional that the U.S. could beat Uruguay and go on?
No, it's possible. And the other part of this equation is I don't completely trust Panama to handle their business against Bolivia. Sure, they're a better team.
Catastilla's out now, too, with the red card.
Yeah, but, they could screw that up as well. So there's a couple different ways that this could go the U.S.'s way still. So I think it's about a 50-50 proposition.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.